So we just left off where Descartes has cast into doubt so many of our beliefs. We can't believe information given to our senses. We can't believe that we even have a body. This all might be just a dream. Uh, and we can't believe even analytic truths because we might be fooled by an evil demon who has the power to make us believe that 2 plus 2 equals 4 when in fact it equals something like 6 or 7. So, but what we cannot doubt is that a thinking thing exists. Okay, so we get to Descartes' famous phrase, "I think, I am." Usually it's "I think, therefore I am," but I'm hesitant to even use the word therefore because that implies a logical relationship. But we have cast into doubt all the rules of logic at this point because logic involves analytic thinking. So the point is that so long as there is mental content, there is a thinking thing that exists. And if you doubt this claim and you think, "I don't think, I am not," then you actually confirm it because there must be a thinking thing having that particular thought. So this becomes the foundation for Descartes' philosophy because it is the proposition that he came to that is indubitably true. There's no way to call this truth into doubt. And so he has found a truth that will persist through the ages and has always been true and always will be true. And from there, he wants to build an argument. So importantly, at this stage in his meditations, Descartes has learned one thing that is true, but it's not very much. We just know that there's a thinking thing that exists. And in fact, I can't even confirm your existence at this point because I only have access to my own thoughts. I can't access your thoughts and confirm that you are a thinking thing. So we're thrust into pretty radical skepticism, although we do know one thing, that I, the thinking thing, exists. And we're thrust into solipsism. Right now, I only know that I, myself, exist. And what we have confirmed is just that a thinking thing exists. And so we get here to Descartes' mind-body dualism. We have confirmed that there is a mind, okay? The thinking thing. You have thoughts. We have not yet confirmed that there is a body thinking those thoughts. And we certainly haven't confirmed that there's an external world. So my thought of the tree at this point in the meditations does not necessarily correlate with an actual tree in the world because we are still doubting our senses. But Descartes doesn't want to leave us in radical skepticism. So he wants to build on this first premise and build an argument and hopefully rebuild the world, but on a basis that we can know with certainty that a world external to the mind exists. But one important thing to grasp at this point is that Descartes conceives of the mind as being distinct, as being a separate substance than the body, because it is possible for the mind to exist without a body, because we confirm the existence of mind before we confirm the existence of body. So right now, we only know that mind exists, and we don't know that body exists because they are necessarily distinct substances. Okay, so let's build the Descartes' argument here. So we're going to start premise by premise, and he wants to inspect each premise to see what we can infer necessarily about the next. So we have premise 1. I think, I am. And he has us inspect this premise. What can we say about it? Well, it's not given to us via the senses. It's not an analytic truth, but we know with certainty that it's true, and we can confirm its truth and convince anyone that it's true. So what he says about this truth is that it is a clear and distinct idea. It's sort of a way of saying that it is a fundamental belief. It justifies itself. So it is a clear and distinct idea. And so that becomes a standard of truth. We know that this is true because it is known clearly and distinctly. So we can infer from that what I perceive clearly and distinctly is true. We now have a standard for what a belief needs to meet to be knowledge. Okay. Now, the next step in his meditations is to inspect the ideas again, clear and distinct ideas. And another clear and distinct idea that comes to us is the idea that ideas themselves come from somewhere. Now, they might come from an external thing. For instance, there might be an external world, where there's things like trees that present themselves to my senses that give rise to the idea in my mind of the tree. Okay, so there might be an external cause for my beliefs. There might also be an internal cause for my belief. For instance, when we are dreaming, the subject, him or herself, is the one creating the dream. So I could be the cause of my idea. But the point is that ideas in the mind come from somewhere. And Descartes infers from that the cause of a clear and distinct idea must be as real as the effect. Okay? So that's the next step in his argument, is that the cause of a clear and distinct idea is as real as its effect. Okay? And he knows that clearly and distinctly just by inspecting ideas. They come from somewhere, that they don't come from nothing. So now Descartes is going to inspect his ideas again, and he also reflects on his mind, and he recognizes that his mind is finite, in that he doesn't know everything. There's a limit to his knowledge, and that seems obviously true. So he thinks that because the cause is as real as the effect, that he, as a finite being, could cause finite ideas. Okay, so the idea of the area of a triangle is a finite idea. It pertains to the triangle, but not to the square. So it has limits to it and to its application. But that idea could have come from himself as a finite being. It could also come from a finite external world. But Descartes recognizes that as a Christian, he has an idea of an infinite God. The concept of God that Descartes accepts is one that is all powerful. So there's no limit to God's power. And God is all knowing. There is no limit to God's knowledge. And God is wholly good, meaning that there are no defects in God's moral character. God is infinitely good. So Descartes realizes that he has the idea of an infinite being, an infinite God. So number 4 would be, I have the idea of an infinite God. Okay. whether or not that idea corresponds to something actual is not proven at this point in the meditations. Okay, but it's beyond doubt, as Descartes inspects the contents of his mind, that he does indeed have this idea in his head. Okay, so then he infers from that if the cause of an idea is as real as its effect, that he, as a finite being, could not cause the effect of an idea of an infinite being. Okay? So, because he has the idea of an infinite being, he reasons that it must have been caused by an infinite being. Okay? So if the idea of an infinite God is in his mind, and the cause of an idea is as real as its effect, then he would be unable to produce that idea of God, and hence the only thing that could produce such an idea is an existing real God. So this is what's known as an ontological proof for the existence of God. It takes a concept of God and infers from that concept the existence of that God. Okay, so this proof for the existence of God does not rely on experience in the world. You don't have to have perceived an infinite God. You just reflect on the concept of God, and it proves the existence of God. Okay, so number 5 would be that God exists, and this is an infinite God, and hence a God that has no limitation to God's goodness. So this leads Descartes to rebuild the world, because if God exists and God is infinitely good, then God would not deceive us. So we can then trust our senses to give us a representation of the world as it actually is. Okay, so Descartes, through this process, infers, that the world is as perceived. Now note that, I'm sorry for the glare there. Let me try to, that makes it worse. I apologize. The world is as perceived. Okay, so Descartes doesn't leave us in skepticism, but he brings us into skepticism to build our knowledge of the world based on a premise that cannot be doubted. Okay? Now, some philosophers, including the existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre, argues that this first premise is Descartes' great realization. And then he starts making some leaps, and he starts making some errors and some mistakes, and we can't infer premise 2 from premise 1, and we can't infer premise 3 from premise 2. And there are many reasonable criticisms of the ontological argument, the idea that from a concept of God, we can infer the existence of God. So this argument is one that I want you to think critically about and to, to challenge. But it's an example of a rationalistic argument, because none of these premises is derived from sense experience. They are all based first on a doubting of sense experience, and then a fundamental claim that itself can't be doubted, and then we build off of it, still not relying on the senses. The senses are the conclusion of the argument. They don't build support for the argument. It's reason alone that builds support for the argument and builds support for the reliability of the idea that the world is as we perceive it, and I'm not alone in the universe, that there are other people out there. I also want you to think deeply about this mind-body dualism. That is an idea that persists in philosophy, not among all philosophers, but persists in philosophical discussions and debates to this day.